if we can provide an environment, and when we say environment, that's both sort of the space that we're in physically, but also the relationships that we have with people one-on-one or as a community. If we can provide a place where people are experiencing safety, grace, truth, and time, then we believe that's where God's grace and healing really works most powerfully.
You're listening to For the City, a podcast of Gospel City Church, where we're committed to the mission of loving God, loving people, and making disciples of all nations. You can find out more at mygospelcity.org. We're glad you're here. This is Season 3.
Hey everybody, welcome back to For the City, a podcast of Gospel City Church. So excited for episode 6. That is a conversation around Always on Mission, the theme we've been focused on for the last little bit. But today, we're joined by a good friend, David from Hope Ministries. And so welcome, David, to the podcast.
Thank you.
So glad that you're here. For those who may not know you specifically, and then also Hope Ministries, maybe could we just start with that, like who you are, family, life a little bit, and then your connection to Hope, your role there, but then let's jump into also what is Hope Ministries, what is that organization doing for the city of South Bend?
Yeah, awesome. So my wife and I have been in the area for about 20 years now. I've been at Hope for 19 of those years.
Wow.
Got 2 kids, 17 and 18, and they're off starting to become more independent, and that's terrifying. And my daughter's going to college next year, and that's terrifying.
Yeah.
And they're driving cars, and that's terrifying. So very terrifying season, but really, really good. And
cool.
I've been at Hope for, as I said, a long time now. I never thought I'd be there that long. We moved to town because my wife got a job here, and I started looking around, and Hope was the first place that offered me a job. And I thought, I'll be here for a few years until I figure out what I really want to do. And turns out that's where God really wanted me to be.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
It's been good.
What's your role there specifically?
So, I'm the executive director.
Okay.
Yep. And I started out as a development director, and I guess they realized I was pretty bad at that, so they promoted me, and I've been doing this for most of my time there.
Very cool. All right. So Hope Ministries, executive director. And so what is kind of the mission of Hope, and what's their goal within the city?
Yeah, so Hope serves people whose lives are broken. And a lot of times people think of us as a homeless shelter because we provide shelter to people who are unhoused. But somebody's housing status is just a small part of their reality and what's going on in their lives. So we don't even like that term homeless shelter because we know there's a lot more going on than just the fact that people need a place to live. And so we're a place where people come and they stay with us for typically between 12 and 18 months. And we try to help them. We talk about heal, transform, thrive. That's kind of our mission summary. Heal from the underlying hurt and pain that they're carrying around as a result of their past traumas. Transform the broken patterns of thinking and living that have been causing them problems in their lives because of the trauma that they've been through in their lives. And then thrive is to start to put together the pieces that they're going to need in order to be healthy for themselves and their family in the future. So there's a lot that goes into it. We can get into some of the details of the programs we provide, but it's really trying to take a fairly holistic look at a person or a family and saying, what's it going to take for them to have the kind of life that they want, that we want for them, that we believe God wants for them.
It's awesome.
How many residents do you guys have at Hope?
Yeah, at any one time, it's close to 100. So we have 30 single men, 16 single women, and then 18 families. So just depending on the ages and number of kids in the families, it typically adds up to
kids
somewhere
running around,
kids running around,
all that.
Single,
and you have different
adults.
sections of housing and stuff.
Different parts of the building to house different demographics.
Before you go deeper, how did you moved here? That's the first job. What drew you to something like that?
I always say it was
your story.
It was God's plan, not my plan. So I graduated in 1994 from Calvin College up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Had a business computer science degree. Spent 8 years doing technology consulting in the for-profit world. At some point, I just kind of had a sense of this is not what I want to do forever. I didn't know what I wanted to do forever. Ended up going back to school, went through a master's in nonprofit management program right before we moved here. So when we moved here, I knew I wanted to do something in the nonprofit world. Didn't necessarily think that it was going to be working with folks whose lives are broken. Didn't even know if it was going to be Christian ministry. Just knew I didn't want to spend the rest of my career in the for-profit world. And so it really is the best way to say it is Hope is the first place that offered me a job. And again, God's plan, not mine, because I've been there ever since. But that's kind of how I ended up there.
Did you come on as the executive director?
No, I spent about 9 months as a development director. We didn't have an executive director at the time, and so the board asked me to interview, and so it happened pretty quick. But
your heart,
out this way.
So I guess you didn't think you'd be there that long, but your heart is really shaped toward that kind of ministry.
Yep, and I can tell you, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and I didn't have a heart. I had a heart for people, but I didn't know how I was going to help people or what I could do. And I saw myself as a manager, as an administrator. I had a lot of experience in project management and managing teams, and I thought, I can run the administrative side of this organization. And pretty quickly, God started to draw me into actually working with people. Like I thought my job would be sitting up in my office, and other people could work with our residents, and I wouldn't be, doing that face to face. And God showed me. The first thing he showed me is how much I needed to heal myself. And one of the things we really emphasize at Hope is that we're all broken, and we're a community that tries to heal together, staff and residents and volunteers, all of us. And I think that's the first thing that really God challenged me with is I got a lot of work to do. And this is a place where I could do my work, my healing, my growth. And as that started to happen, I think that's what really gave me the heart to work directly with people to help them find that same thing.
Yeah. It's been kind of like one thing that I've loved about hearing the different people's stories is just kind of what you said. The Lord uses ordinary people to accomplish his mission.
Yep.
And it's funny how everybody has different stories, but it's like there's some kind of letting go once you have an encounter with the Lord to where you're like, I'm going to follow you and I'll do what I need to do, and I don't have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And yet God equips you and usually changes your heart in the process. And so that's always fascinating to me. Pretty awesome.
Yeah. I love too, like the gospel being for everyone. So you saying like, let's all heal together.
Yeah.
Like I think as, ambassadors for Christ and even as pastors, it can quickly, if we start to view it as like, I'm giving this to other people so they can, receive this and heal, rather than recognizing like I need to preach this to myself every day. And so I'm sure you found yourself where, your life may not look like the person you're trying to minister to, but there's so many similarities of brokenness in my own life that I need this for myself. So I just love, seeing the Lord work through our obedience in ways we weren't expecting, I think is part of this life journey that we're on to glorify God in everything we're doing. So with Hope, obviously you 19 years and like you said, not sitting up in an office somewhere, like you're in it with some people. Are there any transformation stories that just kind of stick out as you reflect on the last 19 years and, specifics maybe can't get into, but as far as man, I've seen God do some incredible things, anything that you would share?
I would, it would start with myself. I think it's pretty amazing that I didn't even know that I needed healing.
Yeah.
When I thought I had it all together. And, I had these little secret things that you don't talk about, but they're no big deal. It's under control. Nobody needs to know about this stuff, right? And as I started to go through some relationships at Hope and talk to people and figure out what they were going through, I number one, started to realize, as you said, we're not that different. On the outside, it looks a little different because I got my own place to live and I got a car and I got a job and I can pay the bills. But on the inside, a lot of that brokenness is the same. Yeah. And a lot of that sin is the same, right? Wow. And so realizing just God shaking me awake to say, you got work to do, buddy, and actually being able to find healing, growth, and transformation myself. Yeah. 20 years ago, I would have said that's not why God called me here. He didn't call me here to work on me. He called me here to help other people, right? Yeah. So, but that, over the years, there's so many stories. We've got 100 people, and every day you see something that amazes you. And Sometimes it's people, recovering. Sometimes it's people just choosing a new path in life. Stories of forgiveness. I always think about a lady who was raped and she got pregnant and chose to keep the kid and had the kid at Hope. And for the first about 6 months there, she was just understandably bitter and angry at God and the world and everybody else. And every time she saw her kid, she just was filled with anger and hatred for the guy that raped, like this really, really horrible story. And
Wow.
And then not because of anything we did other than pray with her and talk to her about Jesus and what he's offering. And just one day she's like, I forgave that guy.
Wow.
And I love my kid now.
Yeah.
And, what did we do to make that happen? We provided a place and we loved her and we pointed her to Jesus, and that's all I can tell you, right? Like God did that.
Yeah.
And
Oh my
it's amazing. And that's the thing. Like I used to think, again, like I was pretty dumb when I started. I used to think we could make this change and transformation happen, right? And if we figured out the right steps and if we did the right things and hired the right people, and you gotta do some things, right? Like God calls us to do some things and provide some things for people, but we're not fixing anybody, right? And we can't change people. But if we provide that space and we point people to Jesus, then that stuff happens, and it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Kind of a common theme I feel like we've talked about with a lot of this is ministry of presence. So kind of what you're saying is like, we were talking about a little bit before we started of the idea that it's a long process. It's not like you're saying, like, here's the 5 steps to take and then you're going to be good and we'll ship you out the door and your life will be great. It's kind of, you just walk with these people in all different scenarios. That story is like this, like, man, that's horrible. I can't even imagine that. And then someone else walks through the door 10 minutes later, probably in like completely different scenario. And you got to find a way to minister to them. But the consistency is kind of we're just going to be here. We're going to provide space. And so what is kind of, within Hope, and we can talk a little bit about some of those programs and classes or things you take people through, but what are some of those spaces that Hope is offering that, even if somebody's listening who's like, man, I have some brokenness, I got some things, what are some of those spaces where you're seeing those transformation stories? Yeah,
kind of at a macro level, we talk about 4 key values in terms of the community we're trying to provide, and that's safety, grace, truth, and time. And safety, sure you guys and most people listening to this are aware of the effects that trauma have on people. And the reason, the main reason that people end up at Hope is because of past traumas. Like, you can point to addiction and mental health issues and all those things that people are dealing with, but they have those things because of the traumas they've been through in their past. And so providing a place where people can actually feel safe is step one. And if they don't feel safe, then nothing else that we do matters, because they're just going to be shut down and in defensive mode and just trying to survive, and we're not going to get through on anything else. So we talk about obviously physical safety, but also emotional safety and spiritual safety. We serve a lot of people that don't believe the same things we do, or people that have been hurt in spiritual communities. And so physical, emotional, spiritual safety is critical. And then grace, truth, and time. Jesus came full of grace and truth. The rest of us aren't good at balancing those two out, right? Most people can do one or the other right? I'm a grace person. I can be very accepting and loving of people and not get down on them when they make bad choices, but I'm not as good at having those really hard conversations when someone needs to hear that. And then there's other people that are really good at having those conversations, but sometimes it comes along a little harsh and judgmental and not always very accepting, right? And so being able to balance both of those, where we always accept people and we are very clear on the truth of the choices they're making and the way it's going to affect them and what needs to happen and what God's calling them to do and all those things. And then time, just providing, as you said, being willing to walk with people for as long as it takes, because healing's not a short-term endeavor, and we don't get to set the time. Like sometimes we think, well, you've been here for 6 months and you still haven't made any progress on your anger, you must not really care or be trying, right? But that's not the way it works, because God's the one doing the healing. It's not up to us to decide how long it takes. So at a very high level, we talk a lot about safety, grace, truth, and time. If we can provide an environment, and when we say environment, that's both sort of the space that we're in physically, but also the relationships that we have with people one-on-one or as a community. If we can provide a place where people are experiencing safety, grace, truth, and time, then we believe that's where God's grace and healing really works most powerfully.
I love the humility and the truth of just God's the one who does the work in the heart. And it's like, even in ministry and pastoring at a church, you're like, at times, we got to say it better. We can preach a better sermon, do a better thing. I'm being repetitive, and your humanness wants to take over, kind of like you said, the 5-step plan. And then when you recognize and you step back and just see there's really only one way to cast a seed. And you plant the seed and you let the Lord do what the Lord does, and the Lord brings the growth. We're just responsible to keep sowing and till the land and get the environment. And so you're creating that environment, you're giving the seed, and then you trust the Lord with the growth. And then the grace and truth balance thing, probably for every victory story you have 10 heartbreaking stories. Because the ministry you're doing is the hands and feet of Jesus, the gospel ministry. It is the church on display in the world in so many ways. How do you keep your heart soft in the heartbreak and not give up on the people?
Yeah. That was one of the big areas that God really had to do work on me before I could do that. Because when I first started, I was convinced again that if we did the right things, then people would get better. And after the first year or two of doing that, I felt like we were doing a lot of good things, and yet people weren't always getting better. And then I started to make that about me, right? And that's what God really had to work on, is it's not about you. Like, there's certain things I call you to do, and I want you to do them well. But remember, I'm the one that brings the healing and the change and the transformation. And so if it doesn't happen, that's not your failure. If you did what I called you to do, then you can trust the rest up to me. And so, another way of saying that is I was in that ministry to get something for me, which was feeling good about myself because look at all these people we're helping. And that's really dangerous, right? And that's what leads to burnout, because if you're working with people aren't always going to get better.
And your flesh of that, it just creeps in.
It's absolutely.
It's like not what you set out to do. But
but you don't even, I didn't even realize it at first, right? Because I just thought I was doing a good thing, and I want to feel good for doing a good thing, right? But then you start to realize, no, I'm helping these people more for me than I am for them. And so really dealing with that issue in myself, and then constantly reminding myself, this is God's work, it's not mine. God calls me to do a really small part in helping this person and changing their life. I got to do that well, but if I've done that well, then it's not on me. I don't need to own the choices they make beyond that, and to really trust God with it. And it's something we talk about with our staff all the time, and something we have to remind ourselves all the time, because as you said, there's a lot of times it doesn't go the way you hope it goes, and you got to be able to be okay with that and not get discouraged personally, or not become judgmental of the people, right? Like, what's wrong with these people? I did all these good things for them, and they're not even taking the help, and they must be horrible people. And it's not. Their lives are just really, really hard, right? And so I got to be okay with the fact that God hasn't done that amazing work yet, or hasn't done it in the way that I wanted, or hasn't grown the seed as quickly as I would want it to grow. Like, I got to trust that what I did matters, even though it doesn't look like it mattered right now. But in God's economy, it mattered, because that's what God calls me to do, and trust the rest up to Him.
And when you get, like, that ministers to me so much, like, even as a pastor, because you hurt when it hurts and stings when you've poured into someone and into people, and then, something deep or a big failure comes out, or all these things, and the tendency is to make that about yourself, and then get bitter about it, get angry about it. And I was reflecting on, if you get the gospel right, and if you make it about Christ and God's sovereignty in this person's life, then you are able to forgive 70 times 7, like Jesus said. And so I was reflecting on 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter, and if I insert my name instead of love there, I'm often irritable. I'm often not bearing all things. I'm often frustrated, and love is not those things. And so that's just like such a great place to get back to and remind yourself of.
Yeah. And you got to do it regularly because it's easy to, as you said, it creeps in and you start making it about yourself again. And then you got to say,
What are, like, as you're kind of in this executive director role, obviously your heartbeat for Hope is to keep reaching more people and more impact for the sake of glorifying Christ rather than yourself. What are maybe some of the, like, things you guys are praying through, obstacles you might be facing, or things that are kind of like, or maybe what's exciting you about what God's kind of doing right now, or opportunities that are coming for Hope?
Yeah, the last, I would say 5 years, there's some, capital campaign, building facilities, things we're working on, and that's not exciting at all, other than the fact that it provides more space for people. But I think the exciting things are just really trying to refine the work that we're doing to better line it up with how people need it. And I think we're just continuing to learn. We have not, even though there is unmet need in our city, we have not, our board, our staff have not felt called to expand facilities-wise or numbers-wise in a significant way. We're really working on trying to get better at what we do, and rather than serve more people, try to up that percentage of the people who kind of walk out of there with significant transformation in their life. And again, knowing that that's God's work, not ours. But so it's more about refining the programs, enhancing the way that we're meeting people where they're at, getting better at understanding the trauma and the effects of trauma in people's lives, and how we can help them work through those things, and bringing more resources to them while they're at Hope.
That's awesome.
What are the major issues or struggles in our city, South Bend in general, or like things that you see the most? Yeah,
so there is one of the big needs, which we're not directly involved, is not our mission, is long-term housing for folks. So, we view ourselves as part of a pipeline. Someone becomes homeless or is experiencing homelessness, they need a place right away to get them off the street right away.
Yep.
A lot of times that's not us, because we've got a wait list and we're full a lot. So there's some things going on in the city, a new day intake center, and some things where that needs trying to be addressed. There's still a need there.
Yeah.
And then we're kind of that medium term or transitional service where people for a year or two who choose to want to work on themselves and really work on them, not just address their housing needs. That's kind of our part of the pipeline. Not everybody needs that. There's some folks that fall into homelessness, and what they need is, we sometimes call it rapid rehousing. They just need a voucher to get back in an apartment, and they can go back to work, and they may not need to spend a year or two at a place like Hope. And that's great if they don't need it. But, so we're more about, again, the subset of people experiencing homelessness that really want to need to invest a year or two in healing from the inside out. And then there's the piece of permanent housing that comes afterwards, affordable housing, and there's a big gap in our city for that as well. So, we feel like within our little slice of that pipeline, we're able to meet a lot of that need. And if we could, again, up our percentages, that would help. I think that the greater unmet needs are kind of at the start of the pipeline and the end of the pipeline, which at this point is not where God has called us to be, but we definitely see that as part of making sure people can be stable and healthy in the long run.
Mm-hmm. And the goal is give them, that safe space. But ultimately, I love that you guys are all about the gospel. You're about Jesus. I think my first experience with Hope was leading worship for chapel for 4 years or so.
Yeah.
And I loved it. Like, there was so much joy there every week, and you guys still do that every week where there's a chapel worship time, and there is a real freedom of people who are seeking the Lord and seeking Christ, and getting to a place where that healing can happen.
Yeah.
You still see the joy of the Lord in just the people and the setting.
Yeah. One of the, I don't know if this directly answers your question, but one of the things that is such a blessing to me at Hope is to have relationships with people who don't have the ability to pretend that they're okay. And that may sound weird, but so many of the people in my life, if I want to hide and just pretend I'm okay and I don't really need Jesus, like, Jesus is nice to talk about on Sunday and we'll sing some songs, but the rest of my life, I got it under control.
Yeah.
That's the way I lived a lot of my life. Right. And that's not healthy. And it's a great blessing to be around people that go, I got no way of solving my problems on my own. I don't even know how to get out of bed in the morning. I'm broken. My heart's broken. I'm looking for whatever can help, right? And then when they experience Jesus, I think that's where that joy comes from. And so for me, and I think for a lot of our staff and people that come to Hope, that gives us motivation and permission to stop trying to pretend we got it all together. And I think you meet Jesus in a different way when you are willing to be dependent on him versus trying to do it on your own.
Yeah. That's so good. It's straight from the Bible, right? Like the people who are coming after Jesus and most willing to accept his message are the lepers and the blind man and the woman who can't heal herself and just the fringe of the robe. Like that little glimpse of hope for people can be the game changer. And that's awesome. But, it's those of us who feel like our life is put together, it's so easy to miss out on Jesus in those moments. So there's a beauty to the brokenness there. I think, you talked a little bit about your partnership with Hope, and I think our church has just had a desire to come alongside Hope over the years. I know we used to, Project Warm was something kind of back in the day.
We have board members, I think, from the church, so shout out to Debbie Mullins.
Mullins, yeah. So what is kind of like, from your perspective, like the way the local church can kind of partner with Hope or be involved, because I think, again, like we were saying, like there's people that will walk through your doors that wouldn't walk through ours, but we hope that they eventually would, because we'd love for everyone to be plugged into the local church to some degree and find that gospel community that can support people in all walks of life. But what does it look like for a church to come alongside Hope and partner and be involved?
Can I expand on that
Absolutely.
too? Like what would you say to a church like ours that feels intimidated, like either they're not helping or their help is hurting?
Yeah.
Or, like I think there's people who don't help because they don't know what to do or they're intimidated, and there's a gospel call to get outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And then there's also like an unhelpful help
Yeah.
that can come from people.
Yeah. A couple things to say about that. So bring me back if I lose my track. But one of the ways that we look at Hope is Hope really is an arm of the local church. Like Jesus established the church, not Hope Ministries, right? So Hope Ministries exists because there's some things that a local congregation community isn't going to do well. Like you guys aren't going to provide housing for people. Right. It's just not what you're designed and set up and structured to do. So Hope can, but yet you guys are called to make sure people are cared for, right? So Hope is an arm of the local church that can do some of the things that individual congregations aren't going to do. And so to support that work through financial giving, through serving meals, through coming and volunteering, like those are things that we depend on. And we kind of say we're doing this on behalf of the church. And so a lot of churches support us and provide those kind of resources for us. And so I think that's part of how your church engages with that.
Yeah.
The second part of that is that we know that the people that come to us their lives aren't perfect and they're not fully healed, even in the 1 to 2 years that they spend at Hope. And that idea of safety, grace, truth, and time, for us, is really a picture of the church. Like that's what a church is supposed to provide for us, right? A safe place where we can be open and authentic, a place where we experience God's grace, a place where we're challenged with God's truth, and a place where we spend the rest of our lives, right? Like it's a long-term thing. And so we want to make sure that our folks, as they transition out of our community, are moving to another community that's going to provide them safety, grace, truth, and time. Sometimes that will be they're going to join your church and you'll see them every Sunday. A lot of times it won't, because their lives are still very hard. Geographically, it's hard. They may not have transportation. There's a lot of reasons why that can't work. But I would encourage people to think about, how can I be in a relationship that provides safety, grace, truth, and time to someone whose life is really hard. And that may be a Hope resident, or it may be someone else that you work with. But like, I really think that idea of loving our neighbor, right, is the person that you're around. It doesn't, you don't have to drive down to Hope every day and say, I want the person in room 303, right? And that might be the person, the person or the family that you choose to form a relationship with. But I don't think for a lot of folks in your church, in my church, and a lot of our churches, it's about, being at Hope twice a week and volunteering. I think it's more about, is there a person or a family in your life that you can form a long-term relationship with? Absolutely. And then kind of to the last part, I think your question, Micah, is there's some things that aren't going to be helpful, right? Sometimes we want to do something quickly and short term to help someone. And so we see somebody on the street and they say they're hungry, or they say they need money for gas or whatever, and we give them money. Sometimes that helps, but an important distinction to draw is a crisis versus a chronic situation. If someone's in a true crisis, which is an unusual situation that they can't deal with on their own, then giving them something can be very helpful. So if someone has just lost their house, or maybe they're getting evicted, but because they lost their job, but they got another job, and in 2 months they're going to be able to provide for themselves, giving them some money, a ride, those kinds of things might be the right thing to do. But if someone's in a chronic situation where they just can't pay their rent at all, me paying 1 month of their rent doesn't really help them, right? It just extends the chronic situation that they're in. So I think we also have to be careful in the way that we help. The one thing that we know Jesus calls us to do is love our neighbor, right? Yeah. Not to solve every problem our neighbors have. And that's where I think it gets back to that relationship. I think in the long run, what the people, when they come out of Hope Ministries, they need the things that make people successful that we see over and over again, the ones that succeed versus the ones that don't. Number one, they have a relationship with Jesus. Mm-hmm. And I think, probably for you guys and for me and for the people listening to this, well, that seems pretty obvious. But I think that the reason for that is when people leave Hope, their lives are still going to be really, really hard, right? Yeah. They're going to have relapses. They're going to break up in relationships. They're going to have people die on them. They're going to lose their job. They're going to lose, like those things. We haven't fixed all of that, right? Life's not going to be perfect. Right. And so when those things happen, the question is, what do they have that's going to allow them to handle that in the best way versus the really unhealthy way, which is, again, go back to drugs, alcohol, the old way of life. And without Jesus, most of us are going to choose the least healthy path, I think. And if we have Jesus to rely on and trust and turn to, that allows people much more of the time to make better choices and to be able to keep doing the hard things that they need to do. And the second piece, so they need Jesus, and then they need people who can be the hands and feet of Jesus and be there for them. And again, that doesn't mean give them money and bail them out of every problem. It means someone that can give them a hug, can talk to them, take them out for coffee, be there for them, just like you and I need in our lives when things get really hard, right? Because we need people that can be there for us consistently.
It's the relationship.
It's the relationships.
And it's like I've found that like any meaningful discipleship opportunity that I've had, it's always not the most convenient thing. You have to take yourself outside of your calendar and make time for it. But I've never regretted that once. Right. Like you come out of those things feeling more blessed and seeing the Lord work and do amazing things, but it is a sacrifice. And yet I think that's the beauty of the Great Commission. If that's Jesus's example. He came and walked with us, right, and didn't just come and meet all the needs and zap all the needs. Sometimes the needs stayed and lingered.
Yeah, exactly. And you sometimes wonder, why didn't Jesus just give that guy money or heal them or or wipe out the bad guys, right? But what he did was provide love and connection and relationships and discipleship and all those things. And as you said, it can get very messy and hard, and it kind of gets back to, again, what we talked about earlier, which is, why are you in this relationship? Are you doing it for you, or are you doing it for them, right? And a lot of times we get in these relationships partly because we want to be able to feel good about ourselves, right? I'm gonna help this person, and if we do that, it's going to be really hard because that person's growth is not going to be a straight line, right? They might relapse, they might not call you back for 6 months, they might get really mad at you when you don't offer to pay money to fix their car for them. Right. And that relationship's probably going to be really challenging. And the question is, can you stick with it for the long term and not just walk away when it gets hard? Because that just reinforces that message to that person that they're not good enough and nobody loves them and all those things. And so, again, if you're going to step into that kind of relationship, you got to be aware that it's going to be hard and you got to be okay when the person doesn't do or get better in the way that you want them to. The call is to be there with them. It's the presence, right? It's to be with them, to love them. It's not to go and fix their life. That's still Jesus' job.
Isn't it true that like the steadiness, the faithfulness, the grace, the forgiveness, and the just being present in relationship may not yield immediate fruit, but like how often 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, that person comes back around to thank you, to see finally they got somewhere. The Lord does use it all in different ways. And so that's why it's like nothing's wasted, even if your own heart is changed and that's the only thing, praise God. But often the Lord does amazing things down the road in those situations in cool ways that you didn't see coming.
And one piece of that, or kind of one seed that gets planted in that, is just the fact that someone actually loves me and stays and doesn't abandon me when it gets hard is sometimes huge for people. Because again, a lot of the people that we serve, they've either never or very seldom had that in their life, right? Somebody that just loved them with no strings attached and didn't want anything from them, and somebody that stayed and didn't abandon them when it got ugly or hard. That can be a huge seed that gets planted and really change their thinking. And it may not produce fruit for a while, but it may be down the road when, they just lost their house, they just lost their job, and they're sitting thinking, should I go back and just start using, or should I keep trying to do these hard things? Well, this person believed in me, right? Maybe because they believed in me, I can believe in myself. And you may never see that you had that impact on someone, but I believe that if I authentically love someone and they feel that love from me, that matters. And I may never see how it matters, but I believe it matters.
Yeah, man. Loving your neighbor, right? I was just thinking as you were talking about that, like we're called to love our neighbor as ourselves, not serve our neighbor when it benefits us or fits our schedule, kind of what Micah was talking about. And like that love piece is like, that is the most Jesus thing we can be to people. Is it doesn't make sense to keep walking with this person who's relapsed or gone through this, keeps going back to the same things, or, the minute we pull back a support that maybe we had offered, it's anger and it's frustration and stuff like that. And it's like that doesn't faze you, because I think about my family, I got 4 young kids at home, and I would do anything for them, right? And I would love them through any situation. Even right now, they're all under 10 years old, and it's, training discipline on, just bad behavior or disobedience, right? It's not them going out and making horrible life decisions, but that day may come where they make a decision that I wouldn't agree with. And I would do anything. I may not support them in that. I may not, fuel that in the wrong way by saying, oh, well, you're somebody I love, so here's money, or here's a thing to kind of let you just keep doing what you want to do. Actually, we call it tough love, right? It's like the pulling back and saying, like, I think this is the best thing for you, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm not removing myself from the situation. I'm going to walk with you through everything. And I would love my kids that way, but to like try to love somebody, who I maybe don't have a deep connection with. And I think that's what Hope's doing, is like, you're this presence, this kind of figure of people who are just going to love you no matter what. And I think that, we see it so clearly in Jesus' life that will have the biggest impact. They will know you by your love for one another. And so to keep ourselves gospel focused at all times, but also recognizing, we can't fix everybody's problems. Man, it can be a frustrating experience, but such a freeing experience too. Yeah. Because then you just like, this is what I can offer, and I think Hope's a great example of that. So one, just thank you for your work and doing that. What's something, as we're kind of like wrapping our conversation, like, if we kind of mentioned it, maybe it's not, hey, I just want to come serve twice a week. But if there are some practical things that people could participate in Hope's ministry to South Bend in this area, what would that look like if they wanted to connect with you guys or serve or whatever? Yeah,
so there's a lot of things on our website. Obviously, donations are always helpful. Volunteers, so there's a volunteering page on our website. Monica, our volunteer coordinator, is awesome. You can email her, call her. Just if you're interested, she'll give you information and help you figure out what works for you. For some folks, that's as simple as just coming and helping serve a meal. Yeah. It's very simple. We can make it easy on you. And then it can go a lot deeper than that. We have mentoring programs for kids. Awesome. We have, you come and help in the early childhood program. There's depending on what someone's interests are, how they want to get involved, but also their schedule. That's something that we try to be really upfront with people. One of the things that we don't want is, again, abandonment, right? Like what we don't want is someone who says, well, I'm going to come and volunteer and build a relationship with this person, but I can only do it on this date and this date. And then I'm going to miss these 3 dates because I'm gone on vacation. And like, that's reality for a lot. That's not meant to be negative, but what we just want to be realistic when we put people in a position that we don't put them in a position that they're then going to have to abandon somebody, or it's going to feel to our residents like, they're just there for convenience sake. So we try to create what we call authentic experiences, and we don't want to put people in places where, just come and clean this floor, and then as soon as you leave, someone else would have cleaned it anyways. Like if it's not going to be if it's not actually going to contribute to the ministry, we're not going to put you in that position. And that's why, and Monica again does a great job, and we just want people to have that honest conversation and say, this is how you can help. And if this doesn't work for you, then let's find something else, because we don't want to just do make work projects or things that aren't going to be authentic opportunities to serve and love our residents. So there's that. And lots of different ways that people can, if they want to volunteer, give. And then, again, thinking kind of longer term about how do we build relationships and what does that look like? And that's, there's no formula for how to build a relationship, right? A lot of that's God's work on putting people together. And, but sometimes, like we've got a number of churches, a lot of churches that come and serve meals. And one of the reasons they do that is to build relationships, right? They get to know the residents, and they see them once a month, and they start to get to know this person and talking to them. And, that may not turn into a long-term relationship, but it might. And it's one of those ways we start to kind of let God form those connections.
That's awesome. Micah, any kind of thoughts as you've heard this, and like as you're thinking about our church, and even, how we've been pushing people, just like, I think one thing for me is, David, just what does it look like to, in your context, engage in these kind of long-term relationships with people? That was a good challenge, but anything like this kind of on your heart as it relates to this conversation of how you would encourage people to step into those, even within our own church or within their context of discipleship relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I think the neighboring piece is great. Who do you have around you? I think a lot of times when you start talking about missions, it's like people feel like they got to go across town or somewhere else, and the first call is just, who do you have around you already? And so 100% we need to be better neighbors and know our neighbors' names, know if they love Jesus. Have we shared our testimony with them? Had we had a conversation with them? Have we ever invited them over into our space? Those types of things is the first and foremost thing. I think ministries like Hope help me. I see people all like there are tangible needs that you can donate clothing to and resources to that are necessary. Yeah. And if you have the ability to meet those, that's one step. If I think a tier 1 thing is serve a meal once a month, be consistent with it so that you get familiar with faces. I know a guy here who started doing a Bible study at Hope several years ago and still does it. And he's just been consistent with it over time. Right. And it's through that consistency. So it all depends on how there's deeper and deeper layers that you go. But it benefits you to get outside those comfort zones. Yeah. And so I think that it's always an opportunity to think about, for sure.
I think the burden we would have is like, don't let the idea of like, I'm going to go serve once a month a meal, that's me always on mission.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and I think there's this, and I sense that kind of what you're saying, David, a little bit is like, you just showing up, scooping some food onto a plate is not always on mission. And there's a little bit of a danger of, if I get into an environment where people are like investing all their time and energy into this ministry, and I just come alongside and I do one simple task that, I've done my part. And I think there's got to be a level of, yes, absolutely. There's tangible things you need to do, active things, hands and feet of Jesus type moments, but it's a heart issue. Like, what is the purpose? And so I think if we kind of can close with that idea of what kind of where we started, that are you serving for yourself? Are you trying to be always on mission so you feel good about yourself to be always on mission? And this is me preaching to myself right now. Like, am I serving others so that I would feel better about who I am? Or do I genuinely want to open my hands and say, Lord, do whatever you want with my life? And then that leads to opportunities where, man, I got a Tuesday night free, and so I'm going to go down to Hope and I'm going to serve a meal and stuff like that. I think the danger would be to like, oh, I got to do something for Jesus or I'm not being always on mission. But Jesus wants your heart. He wants you to express love for others because of what the love that He's given to you. And
Get the mind of Christ.
Yeah.
Prefer others as better than yourself.
Yeah.
Jesus humbled Himself to be a servant to mankind. He came to serve and not be served. Take on that. I think one last thing that I would say to Gospel City is, or any church, but you, David, saying that Hope is an extension of the local church, and there's a desire that these individuals would meet Jesus, would graduate, and would find their way into a local church. I think a church like Gospel City is probably intimidating to anybody coming out of that situation, although there have been people who come here, and you just never know who's coming through your doors as a church.
Yeah.
And so open your arms wide.
Yeah.
Be on the lookout for anybody in any situation, and don't miss the opportunity to be the kind of church that is welcoming, hospitable, full of brotherly love, full of unifying love, and full of the gospel of Jesus Christ, where anybody from any situation can walk in the doors and feel welcomed, feel at peace, feel safe, feel grace, feel truth, all the things that you're providing there. That people should not have to go find that elsewhere. Yeah. And once the healing has happened, they should find it in the local church. And so we want to be that kind of church.
Thanks for listening to For the City, a podcast of Gospel City Church. We want to encourage you to like or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you know when the next episode is released. And if you found this episode helpful, make sure to share it with a friend. We'll see you next time.